Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Big League Breakdowns. This is episode 16, and we are one member short today, but that is okay. He was the weakest link anyway, and we are getting back into this.
Ooh.
Love you, John. That was
God, I
hard.
hope he's watching. I want to
I
comment and immediate fire back.
I I hope he is. But yes, we are back. Me, myself, Tyler, Will, and Bobby. Who maybe will get more screen time today, which is unfortunate for all of you because you get to see his ugly mug for more than you need to. But
You are
we are
foul.
but I'm just I don't know. I'm feeling different today, okay? Feeling good
Let's
about
say the only
things.
reason he doesn't have his own panel is because his head's too big to fit in it.
That's true.
You're foul too. I don't know what I'm doing over here to deserve this, but all right, man.
John's not
Yeah.
here. We need another culprit.
You know what? And don't act all innocent when you're just always, using us as your punching bag, mister. Okay? We're getting some
Usually
personal
it's John.
vendettas at the start of the show, but regardless, we are going to talk about some Atlanta Braves today and what happens with them after the Ronald Acuña injury. We're going to talk about some umpires once again because we can't go like 2 weeks without having a conversation about umpires. And then we also be getting into the City Connect jerseys, the Cardinals and the Blue Jays at the end of the show. But let's start with the Braves. If you've seen our quick video already, we have talked about, Acuña goes down a few days ago now in a series against the Pirates. I watched it. It did not look good. They confirm it's a torn ACL. He's done for the year. This is his second torn ACL in 3 years. And obviously a huge blow for the superstar of their team. And, I with him going down, I know he wasn't having the greatest season up to this point, based on his standards, but I really do have questions about the Braves now. Like, you go from the start of the season where we were predicting, all right, it's going to be Dodgers or Braves. You're going to be the representative for the NL. They're so stacked. They're far and away better than anybody in the league. And now it's like the Braves have been not themselves. They're behind in the division to the Phillies and haven't been making up ground. And I just think there is some cause for concern there. So, Will, I'll go to you on this one. And I know we kind of, again, touched on this the other day, but do you feel that there is a sense of panic in and around the Braves camp and with their fans with how things have been going? And like, it's not the exceptional Braves that they're used to seeing.
I believe there's probably some panic in the fan base just because anytime you have a team that has been as dominant as the Braves have been, suddenly slack off for as long as they have, and now seeing two big guns in Acuna and Strider out for the season, yeah, that's definitely going to raise some concerns. However, the Braves' chances of winning the division are drastically hit with this injury. They're going to make the playoffs. There's not a lot of good teams in the National League, and they're 8 games over 500 right now. There's only like one, maybe 2 teams underneath them who have a 500 record at all. So the Braves are going to get into the postseason. It's just a matter of, is it going to be a division? Probably not, unless the Phillies collapse and the Braves get really, really hot at the same time. But the Braves will have a couple months to figure out which hole they want or how they can replace the injuries and the holes that are popping up in the offense and the back end of the rotation, and see if the offense can get into a bit of a groove that can lead them into the postseason. There's one thing that could benefit them if they want to use the freaking excuse of, hey, we haven't been as good because we've had the bye for whatever the first 3 days. Looks like you're going in as a wild card team, regardless if you have Acuña or not. Put your money where your mouth is.
I think Braves fans have the sense of optimism because the last time they lost to Cunha for the season, they won the World Series. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you don't want to lose a player like that. And the problem for them right now is they're just not getting the production out of their stars that you're used to seeing in the past. Austin Riley's really struggled this year. Matt Olson's not been himself. Albies has been okay, but there's room for improvement there. I mean, the guy that's really been carrying them all year. And if not for him, they'd honestly be in so much trouble as Marcell Ozuna. I mean, he single-handedly feels like he's carrying that offense right now. Sean Murphy just came back from injury, so we'll see how that plays. And it's just like Michael Harris, all these guys have just not been playing up to their standards. And I think there is a sense of, okay, at some point the trend is they'll turn it around because they're not, these kind of players. But dude, we're a third of the way into the season, and I think there is again some cause for concern. They've they've won only 5 of their last 15 games. So I mean they've been kind of going down, and this is obviously with the injury happening. Now they do have a series against the A's coming up, so if there was ever a nice spot to get a sweep, it'd be now. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that there's definitely a lot of questions surrounding this offense, which like coming into the season, it was like, is this going to be the best offense of all time? Like, look at all these players they have. I just like
No.
will. I know I'm being dramatic. I'm being dramatic for the cause, but
Yes.
like there's a lot of star power, right? And like you're just not seeing it from those guys right now.
No, I mean, they're not going to perform what they did last year. Last year was historic what they did, and everyone, or at least it felt like a lot of people were having career years, especially from Acuña, Olsen, and really Ozuna. Um, I I do. The bats are going to figure it out. I mean, I see the dog days of summer is where I'm really going to kind of see what this team is going to be at the end of the season, potentially the postseason, because that's where you really start to get the separation. I feel like from like the actual contenders and the teams that are just playing around. That's you get a lot of teams that falter off. The Braves have had some players step up later in the season in the past during the summer, and even back in 2021, like you had said. Um, they started off bad. They were 25 and 26 at the end of May. They were 38 and 41 at the end of June, but then they got hot in July, August, and September, ran that to get a World Series. So if the Braves really are going to figure their stuff out, the dog days of summer are going to be where they need to do it. Otherwise, even if they, no matter if they make the postseason or not, if they aren't themselves, they could easily get kicked out by whoever they're playing against. And I think the latest, like if the season ended today, pull stuff. I know it doesn't mean much, but I toy around with those. I like to play the hypotheticals. I think it had the Braves playing like the Cubs, or no, it was the Giants. I think in the first round, and so
Yeah.
if it's a situation like that, that could be what the Braves need to also build momentum. Whereas I think whoever was the fifth seed had to play, or the sixth seed had to play like the Brewers, and they can be a little pesky the way their offense has been this season.
Yeah. And I don't know. Is it a set? Is it maybe the Braves feel like it's all like, more pressure now because of what the Phillies are doing? Like, I feel like maybe that's the narrative right now. Maybe that's what we're doing, honestly. Like, the Phillies are leading the division by 6.5 games right now, and it's been growing. And like the Braves, like, I guess it's just what we expect of them, like, because they're 8 games over 500. Like, they're not playing bad ball, but I mean, you expect them to be, one of the best teams in the league, and you'd kind of expect at this point in time that they'd be the ones that are pushing 40 wins. So I don't know. In your opinion, do you think it's the Phillies' success that maybe is why the media is kind of like down on them a little bit more than usual, or is it just because they are performing poorly to their standards?
I'm going to say it's a little bit more them performing poorly to their standards, but I do think the Phillies' success is a big thing too, just because also the last two postseasons, the Phillies have had the Braves number. So records to the Phillies haven't really mattered. Um, but the Braves are, I mean, the cut was it a couple years ago, they were battling with the Mets for a lot of the season, and they came back late and took the division. I don't really remember a whole lot of stuff at that time being down on the Braves. It was more of, oh, look at these amazing Mets. They figured it out. Steve Cohen's a god sent from above who's throwing money on anything he wants. And then the Braves took the division. It's like, well, it's just the Braves doing the Braves things again. So I feel like the criticism this time is less them trying to overtake the Phillies and more of Braves are good, but they're not the Braves good. So therefore, they're just a bad team, or they're just set to be a disappointing team in the postseason, not a bad team.
I mean, also, I think the other thing, with them too is that I think they're in constant comparison with teams like the Dodgers and stuff. But yeah, I mean, you look at what they did last year, right? And I think like it's almost one of those things where you're setting yourself up for failure in a sense because you're if you're so good at something and you're not hitting that stride again. I mean, it's hard to replicate what they've been able to do honestly for a few years now. Um, and again, it's like they're 8 games over 500. They're not playing bad. I just have questions about in the longevity of the season and, going into August, September, October, around postseason time. You've already lost your ace on the mound. You've lost your superstar player. Like injuries are probably going to happen more, and they're going to ramp up. And you just don't know if Riley's going to turn around. You would hope he can, or Olsen. Like now, in your opinion, do you think it's a situation? And I feel like we've been talking about the Phillies like this for a while. It's like, all right, if you get in, that's all that matters. Because when you're in this postseason, anything can happen. And I think if you're the Braves, you feel good about your chances against anybody, even if they did come in a wild card spot. But is that their mentality? Do you think, or is that should that be their mentality, or are they, trying to, be the best team in the NL?
At this point, their mentality should be we just want to be the best version of ourselves entering the postseason, regardless if that takes 2 weeks and they can run the rest of the season hot, or if that takes another month. They are set up to still be in a good situation, barring any other major pitching injuries. You have Sale and Ronaldo Lopez dominating at the top end of the rotation, and you don't really need to worry about five guys in the postseason. So the Braves' puzzle piece right now at filling out that back end of the bullpen is not so much of an issue. It will be an issue if they have another pitching injury because then you still have Sale, Lopez, and Fried. Morton does well. He does have uneven history when it comes to injuries, and I know Fried does too, but Fried's been so dominant that I'm just like, if he can be another ace to add on with Sale and Lopez, that's great. If Lopez can hold a fraction of what he's doing now at the end of the season, that's also great. That should get him through the first round, no problem. Whoever they have to face in the second round is really going to test them because if they're set up to face the Phillies again, they better have that mindset of we can beat anyone because you haven't proven it the last 2 years.
Yeah, and I think like you kind of look at okay on the flip side as well. If you're any team that's facing them, if they are to come into a wild card spot, like if you are um, like you said, the Cubs or the Giants, you're like, damn, we drew the Braves in the wild card series. Like, so I think it's two sides of it. But it's funny because like you look at their stats like offensively, like they're still like a top 10 team in a lot of categories. Their pitching has been okay. It's just I don't know. I feel like myself included, like I have this perception, and a lot of the media, it's just like they're not kind of up to their standards, and there's just something about it, man. Like this year, it just feels like to me that they're missing something. They're not their old selves, and I guess maybe that's why I'm kind of more nervous for them than I've ever have been in previous years or whatever. But I just yeah, and you also, I mean, not to mention you throw in the recent playoff history, um, which obviously the last 2 years hasn't been great. So it's just like this whole thing. So I don't know. Are the Braves going to be okay without Acuna? I think that
Yes.
they'll be able to manage, yes, but do I think they need to look to bring a piece in? And do I think they'll bring a piece in? I do. I think when the trade deadline comes around, I do think they're going to try to make somewhat of a splash, and I don't even know if it would be a direct replacement of Acuna in the outfield. But I mean, yeah, I don't. I'm trying to think like who they could kind of move around. But I think there's going to be options out there, and I think they're going to try to make a move. I mean, what is your take on that? Like, do you think they ride this out with these guys that they're calling up, or do you think they try to do something sooner rather than later?
I think part of that could depend on what they try to do in the back end of their rotation because right now, was it AJ Smith Shawver's now on the IL, and I think he's out 6 to 8 weeks. And so they are struggling to find that minor league pitcher to step up and fill in as really just a bulk innings guy. That's all they need at this point. Just keep him in the ball game, eat up 5 to 7 innings, preferably 6, at least an outing, and just stable the team to get into the postseason. And then after that, they're out of the waters. But the thing is, I don't feel like the Braves have the farm system anymore to trade away whoever to fill up their pieces, and they're probably going to have to make a choice right now between trading for someone to fill in for Acuña or trading for someone to fill in the back end of the rotation, or maybe better if they want to, but in other words, replace Strider. And they have a lot of pitching prospects in their system, which is probably what they're going to rely on to fill in the hole there. So my guess is they're going to try to look for someone to fill in the gap for Acuña. The question will just simply be, do they go more maybe defensive heavy or speed heavy in the outfield, especially if it looks like other offensive pieces are going to step up and be their normal selves? Or will they maybe go more offensive oriented because the offense is still struggling? And I don't think that's something they're going to be able to truly know until after the All-Star break. But if they, I guess, flounder for another 2 weeks and middle of June, still finding a lot of troubles and are losing a lot more games, then they might pull the trigger, I would guess, on a bullpen, on a rotation arm at that sense, because I imagine that's probably what would be causing the most panic this urgently, at least.
So yeah, and you mentioned like the young pitchers they have that kind of fill out that fifth spot. Like I feel like we talked about that like pre-season with them. Like okay, they do have some pitching depth, starting pitching depth. If you know, because
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about Sale, and if he has his injury history and stuff like that, and it actually has kind of been like not as straightforward as we thought. Like I think Bryce Elder's been getting hit around, and then they had just brought up a guy, and I already kind of I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but that they were pretty happy with in his first start.
Mm-hmm.
Schwallenbeck, I don't Schwallenbach.
Good luck.
Who
I'm going to
was
sit out on this one.
he was a second round pick in 2021, and they liked what he did, but do they care about that fifth spot when if they still are getting the production you expect with their four? I don't know. And then I think the other question too is like, so in their World Series season, they kind of went the route, and I think most contenders do if they have a superstar go down. You go the route of okay, let's get a guy who's essentially a rental, who can fill plug the hole for this season, and then we'll basically ship him out, or he'll go to free agency next year. And that's probably the case here. So like, looking at like guys on 1 year, with 1 year remaining, before hitting free agency, like there's a couple out there that are interesting. Jaron Duran, who's had a really good year for Boston, is kind of on that list. Um, One that's funny, I don't think it'll happen because it's interdivision, but Jazz Chisholm is on the last year of his deal as well, and I think that'd be hilarious. I don't think that
It
happens,
costs
but
way too much.
yeah, and I just don't think they want to deal with him, man. There's been a lot of like, dude, like he comes out on the podcast over the winter and like says all this stuff, and everybody's like on his side, and then it's like continually kind of backfired on him. It's like all this stuff is coming out. It's like, oh no, like maybe he was actually in the wrong. Regardless, there's options. Edward Olivares for the Pirates, who's been decent this year. So, I mean, in your opinion, if they were to make a move, what route do you think they go? Like, did they go the route of who did they bring in? And they brought in Jock, right, in their World Series year, and
Jorge Soler.
Soler too. Yeah, so like, I mean, that's probably the route they would go again. No.
I am thinking Mets as the team that I'm kind of looking at. They might make a deal with, because the way the Mets have been playing, they're gonna dump whoever they can. And I see 2 potential candidates. I don't think they'll trade for both. It's a matter of what they really want at the time. And that's Harrison Bader or JD Martinez. And it purely goes on, do they want more defense or do they want more offense? Bader's fast. He actually is hitting decently right now. He's batting about 270. Doesn't have a lot of extra base hits, but he gives you good defense. So that could be enough to plug the hole there. especially if offensive pieces step up. If they want to put Ozuna in left field, regardless of his defense, because they decide, you know what, we need that extra bat, maybe something close to what Soler was, then they could trade for JD Martinez from the Mets, who I could easily see being a good offensive fit there. I mean, he could easily do what Soler did when they traded for him in 2021. The only thing is Martinez will play little to absolutely no outfield. So he is strictly a
Yeah.
DH, and you are relying completely on Ozuna in the outfield. So if it really does come to that, then they're, I don't want to say giving up on the offense, but they are waving the red flag at that point of we are in a dire situation and we need someone. But I don't think they can make any moves for someone along the caliber of Jazz Chisholm to break the bank, the farm system, especially because the pieces they would have to trade are pitchers. They kind of need those pitchers right now.
And also, like, it's not worth it, right? Like, if you're
Mhm.
gonna trade for a superstar, I don't think you can call Jazz that. I don't know if you could really ever call Jazz that, but especially at this point in
He's an
time,
all-star, and many people see him as a potential face of the
yeah.
Marlins moving forward. If they were to keep him, the Marlins aren't going to keep him because the Marlins keep no one except for, money. So
I
he's
just
going to go to somewhere else.
it's just funny because I seen that name pop up and I'm like, that'd be really funny. I think it's very unlikely. But another guy that I
Mhm.
think would be interesting is now he's really cooled off recently, so maybe not. But Jesse Winker, another in division trade that would be. But it feels like the Nationals now. Granted, the Nationals, give them credit because they've stuck around for a lot
Mhm.
longer already than people have thought. And I think the plan probably for them was they signed a lot of vets, so they're probably assuming they were going to be pretty bad, trade these guys away at the deadline. I think they probably still
Mhm.
opt to do that, and I think he'd be a pretty good piece for that. I agree. I think Harrison Bader makes a lot of sense. But as you said too, with JD Martinez, like I don't think they'll do that because you
Mhm.
basically have to put him in a DH. Like you can't put him in the outfield, and I also don't think they're comfortable with Zuna in the outfield. I mean, you have Kelnick out there, you have Harris. So you do have, I mean, Harris obviously is a great defensive center fielder. You don't need a world beater per se in right field, but you
Mhm.
do need somebody who's serviceable. You're definitely not getting that from JD Martinez, I don't think. And I think Azuna, in a way, I don't know if you are either. So Bader makes sense. He's had a decent year. And then the last name, and I don't know because, again, they might have to give up a decent amount, but Bretton Doyle, I think makes sense. He's had a decent year with the Rockies. Now, are they going to try to sell high on him because he's had a decent year? And will the Braves want to pay that? I don't know. But needless to say, there is options out there for the Braves if they elect to go that route. And again, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, I do think if they are to, make a trade, I think it would be more for a guy like Winker over Doyle, just because they probably want a guy that's a little bit more proven per se. And that Winker's probably not going to cost them much. So again, there's options for them. I think they'll probably feel at some point that they need to make a move, but I think there's a lot of time before, we get into that conversation. But I mean, yeah, the
Mhm.
Braves, like they're not they're almost a victim of their own success, man. Like they're not even playing per se bad, but when you have these expectations of what they are, it's really really hard to compete with that. So, yeah, Will, I don't know if you have anything else to add to this conversation or not, but I mean, I know
The
as a Phillies
Phillies.
fan, I was gonna say as a Phillies fan, I know you're
Mhm.
loving talking about maybe the Braves taking a step back. But yeah, with that, we will move on to our uh a little bit of discussion on umpires again. We had a little bit of controversy, of course, we did about some interference calls happening in the last few weeks. One happening a couple days ago with Juan Soto and the Yankees against the Angels. Also going to talk about the Bryce Harper ejection that happened, I guess, about a week ago now in Colorado, and just overall
Mhm.
umpires stealing the show once again a little bit. And well, I'll start you off. Like, let's talk about the Harper stuff first. Harper gets rung up on a call and kind of, wants answers about it and immediately gets tossed. And it felt like, from his standpoint, obviously coming out afterwards and talking to the media about it and just looking at it, it felt very, very light. And, the guy
Oh
just
yeah.
ejected the Phillies, one of their best players.
Mhm. Trying to keep the flames down before I speak. The Harper situation was about as light of a toss as you're ever gonna see, because there was a questionable call made pitch before he struck out, and then the ejection, as you can see here on the video, he's just talking with the guy. He just wanted a conversation. There's nothing from the body language of the ump to even show that he per se was saying anything, if much at all. And then he just rings Harper up. Now, the one thing the video doesn't show, which I know the crew chief after the fact, which I believe it was Chris Guccione, but I don't remember 100%, had said that Harper threw his helmet out of frustration prior to the discussion. And then that was a big warning, per se, that led to or could have been a reason for the ejection. Because Harper never was heated. Everyone's aware that Harper will get heated if he's upset. So it was very minor to begin with there. But also, you're going to these games to see players like Harper, to see the superstars that every team has, to eject the superstar on a very minor interaction that was never heated. And from what Harper said, was just the conversation of, you're going to go any more outside, or you're going to go any more down, like, and the umpire going, like, he just didn't want any of it. And then Harper tried to keep the conversation going and tossing him. Like, that's just embarrassing for the umpire and just bad for a baseball game, because you're taking out your big piece to begin with that you're going the game to see.
So, okay, here's my, I guess, question on it, because I know umpires are big on, hey, you know what? You can argue about a lot of things, but balls and strikes are not going to be one of them. Like, they have a very low tolerance for that. But the other thing is, like, they always talk about, or at least, the perception is, if a guy is asking, where a pitch is, it's fine unless they're like showing an umpire up. Like, Harper
Mhm.
doesn't do that here. He's just having a conversation. Do you
Mhm.
think this was really like a thing with, Harper kind of has a reputation of being more of a hothead, and maybe that like had some bias in this?
I feel like Harper's hot-headedness now is really tampered down since he's been on the Phillies. So I don't feel like that's much of a thing anymore. Sure, he still gets ejected a couple times this season, and if something really pisses him off, he will let you know. But, like, I feel like this one, if anything, was more out of just the body language he did than anything, and that's from probably the frustration he had from the ball that was called a strike, and then striking out and throwing his helmet on the ground, which he was fined for. So, but it's hard because the umpire shows no emotion whatsoever, like, ever. Like, I can't tell you 100% what set him off. Just all of a sudden, he's just la 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 la, and I've heard enough. Like, what?
But I mean, is that a product of just not wanting to hear talk about,
Dude
balls
had
and
a
strikes?
bad day.
Because, like, so it's a weird conversation, because, like, I do think that umpires have to draw a line at some point of, if a guy is consistent, or like,
All right.
they have to have some kind of policy with balls and strikes, because you can't have a guy or a manager yelling at you the whole game. But, like, I think that where you're having a conversation is ridiculous to ring a guy up for
Right.
if
But he
he's
was
just
having a
talking.
conversation. Right.
Yeah.
No, Harper's thing though was, it's, if what Harper said is completely true and based on the video, it does seem true. He never truly argued balls and strikes. He voiced his frustration at the one pitch that was a ball called a strike. He threw his helmet when he struck out of frustration. But then after that, everything he says is on the lines of a conversation. Where was that pitch? Are you going to go any more outside? But the umpire did not want to hear about it. It's not like Harper was saying that pitch is not a strike. You got to be better
Yeah.
than that. Don't walk away from me. Like, he was basically trying to have a conversation, and Walsh just wasn't having anything of it from what is typically a situation that does that players will have conversations. They'll go, you're going to go a little bit more inside there. Is that as far as you're going to go? Something along those lines. So the fact that Walsh wouldn't say anything just feels
Mm.
very unprofessional. And I have so
Yeah.
many thoughts about that gray area of what is allowed and what isn't allowed,
Well,
because you
yeah.
should be allowed to have a conversation of any type to an extent. Yes, you can't immediately go barking at the umpire and calling him names and whatever. But if the pitch was a ball and you're curious about is it a ball or a strike, you should be able to ask. Now, if the umpire gives the kind of vague meh or whatever, maybe, you kind of just got to eat it up then and be like,
Yeah.
all right, that's the best of it. But there should be a room for discussion, because there's a difference between asking a question and flat out arguing.
Well, I think that's where I was gonna kind of get to too and ask you is like there is this gray area, and that's gonna be a conversation topic coming up in a second as well. But there's this gray area of you know, what is a guy allowed to get away with? And again, I guess there is this quote unquote policy that umpires have where they won't let a guy consistently talk about balls and strikes, but it just feels like as you said, it's kind of ump to ump. A lot of guys are fine with probably having that conversation. Like the inning, the inning ended, I believe, after that, right? Like that was the end of the inning. He was just talking to him
Yes.
as
It
they
was
went
the
to break.
first inning,
Yeah,
top of the first. Three
and he
batters
just
into the game.
right, and he's just standing there. Like it's not like again. I think if Harper was showing him up, that's one thing. But he just kind of sitting there. Like I just think, as you said, there is a gray area with what are guys allowed to really get away with. And I know it's obviously it's based on what the umpire's judgment is and stuff like that. But it feels like, as you said, you're taking away a player who fans are coming to the park to see over something that's so minuscule, and it's just like it's not a good look, like you said.
So here's the only thing I can really say right now. I mean, I have a long list of what I think the umpires should be allowed to do or whatever in these situations. I don't want to go too much into that because I'm going to go on a tangent and this will never end. But the first thing is that, which I do think is probably a big reason why Harper was ejected here, is I do not think throwing equipment should be at all any reason for an ejection unless the player physically throws it at the umpire. Players should be allowed to be frustrated, and there's already a fine in place if they throw equipment or break equipment. Let that be the case, because they can be frustrated and it might not mean anything. You might have something like the Harper situation. He's frustrated at the result of how everything transpired in the end, but he wants to figure it out so later in the game he can be in a better situation should something similar happen. So I've seen throwing equipment flat out lead straight to an ejection. And I've seen times like this where it's like a warning. And it's like, all right, listen, just because he's throwing something in frustration does not mean, one, it's directly associated with you or that it means he's going to be hostile towards you. There are times where they might coincide. But every time I hear, oh, he threw his equipment, so that was a big warning for the ejection, I'm like, leave it be. It's not. Don't connect the two. I can be frustrated and then get into an argument. The other thing
Yeah,
I wanted to say quickly was that I do think umpires should have some sense of a visual warning that they give a player before an ejection. Now, I do think there are certain things pertaining to language or if they throw something directly at an umpire that could warrant that you don't need a warning, but there should be some sense of you've done enough. Now, sometimes we do see it from umpires. You might see an umpire or a player argue about balls and strikes, and an umpire might hold up their hand or something, and you can physically see them say that's enough or stop. In which case, they got the warning, they continue the bark, and they eject them. So be it. But I feel like to just blatantly throw out someone without any warning can get really uneven or uneasy if there isn't a clear situation or something that leads to the ejection, such as the Harper situation. And I also think of the Anthony Rendon ejection in Washington 10 years ago, where he struck out, kind of flipped his bat, stood there, didn't look at the umpire, didn't say a word, and the ump tossed him. Body language is apparently bad that day. So there needs to be something that kind of tells the player they've reached their limit and rein it back if they want to. And it could be at least something. I have other things too, but those are kind of the two main things right now that I feel like should be done.
But so that's the other thing too. Like, I don't think it's consistent between umpires of like, it's definitely not consistent between umpires of
Right.
if they care about if a guy throws a helmet. Like, it, I think in this case, I think you're right. Like, it definitely led to the ejection because he throws his stuff or whatever, and it's like I agree in the sense that him doing that, if something is in place, which there is, if there's a fine there for that happening, then that shouldn't be a part of the leading to an ejection for a guy, like, because
Mhm.
that to me feels like a separate issue. Like, that's just
Mhm.
frustration coming off.
Yep.
Like, now again, if you're who was it? The Toronto Brett Lowry, I think, or
Brett
whoever it was
Lowry.
who
Yeah.
yeah, who like slammed his helmet at the ground
Mhm.
and hit the umpire. That's different. But
Yes,
I
I
think
agree.
I think like it's silly to like kind of combine the two because like if you're getting on a guy for throwing his helmet, you then if you kind of have a short fuse, like all right, if he says anything to me, I'm going to throw him out. Like that's kind of ridiculous to me. And again, I
Right.
just the consistency is the issue, and you know
Mhm.
there's different umpires. That's I get it, and it's not like this is a like rule, I guess, per se. Like it's not like something totally enforceable, I guess. But like
Mhm.
the fact that it's different between umpires, and not only different between umpires, different between days of the week. Like if a guy, it seems like if a guy is just in a bad mood one day,
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
doesn't. I think it makes sense what you're saying. Like there has to be like a warning or something in that case, so we don't have a situation like this again.
So I'm gonna go in now to the rest of the bullet points. But so sorry if I kind of run off. I'll try to stop to give us discussion. But the first thing does answer kind of that question because I agree there needs to be more of a set like this is what the rule says and therefore it's even across umpires. The first thing was that sorry, I'm just going to read this bullet verbatim so I don't goof things up. Sorry if it looks weird. Ejections should not be allowed unless a player verbally like abuses, uses obscene, vulgar language towards an umpire, and ejections should not be allowed to happen for other reasons. Because you had mentioned like constant barking from a dugout, and there's other things probably that I'm not thinking of that don't fall into the categories that I've already said, unless the player is argued for at least 10 seconds. I was trying to think of a reasonable enough time because you have to admit, it's kind of entertaining when you're watching a game and you're seeing a player or a coach mouth off at an umpire for a while and they get really heated. It's one of the things the game is kind of lost with the replay now is we don't get those interactions on the field anymore. The only exception to the 10-second situation is if a player, like I said, has said thrown something at an umpire, said something they shouldn't have said to an umpire, then they can eject them ahead of time and say afterwards, what was the reason for the ejection? They did blah blah blah, and so be it. And usually you can kind of tell anyway from the replays, thanks to John Boy too, is that
Yeah.
what they say during those ejections. But if the 10-second rule is not ideal enough, the other thing was you could do a warning and just say like that's enough and leave it there, and that can help more for like a dugout situation since you can't really time those barking. Those just they happen every once in a while, and if you suck a lot, you're going to hear them more often clumped together. The second was now this is where I want to put a little bit more penalty potentially on the umpire for wrongfully ejecting player, and is that if an ump wrongfully ejects a player not doing one of the things said above, he is suspended for the rest of that series and the next series. I'm a
Hmm.
big proponent on other reasons umps should be accountable for their actions, but this one I feel like if we're gonna put guidelines down as to what you can and cannot do regarding an ejection, if you don't follow the rules, you are penalized for it. Plus, if you put something in place that kind of prevents umpires from like, hey, if you pull the string or if you pull the what is it, stroke rope, whatever, my brain's not deciding what type of thing I want to do. I want to pull the hook early on the player. and it's unwarranted, all right, but you're going to get penalized for that because you shouldn't have done that. So this could potentially lead to maybe more time allowed on an argument, which would, I think, make games a little bit more interesting anyway. And it allows players to bark a little bit more.
So I'm
So
gonna
yeah,
say real quick, like,
no,
do you?
that's really
This might be a bigger conversation, and I don't even know if we want to get into this right now. But do you think umps, or like not even umpires, but like you could even broaden this to refs across all sports? Like, should there be like a penalty per se in place or consequences for not only like in baseball throwing guys out, but like just being held accountable for like making bad calls, like umpires, missing an X amount of strikes and balls during a game. Like, do you think that should be something that's instituted? I know this is kind of off the beaten trail, but I just want to see your thoughts on this.
absolutely. I feel like there should be some type of penalty. However, at this point, I'm done fighting that fight. I will voice my frustration when something bad happens in the game that I'm watching. But I mean, from what the union has claimed, the umpires union that is, they claim to do some type of punishment, or at least, you know, maybe an umpire has a couple bad games, they talk to the guy, or they do some type of suspension you don't hear about. I mean, so to say they don't do anything anymore, I'm like, yeah, they don't do enough. Do they do nothing? If I truly looked into it, they probably do something. I mean, heck, take last year, for example. It wasn't a suspension, but Angel Hernandez was out of baseball for like 3 months because of a back injury. And like 2 weeks into the season, I felt like I was the only human being on the planet that was like, where did Angel go? And then, like, at the end of May, finally the internet caught up with me. And I'm just like, okay, now we're all aware that Angel Hernandez is not present and hasn't been present. But that was 2 months that had passed. An umpire's not going to get suspended or like whatever benched for 2 months unless they really screw up Angel Hernandez. So, like, you might see maybe if you really paid attention to every box score and umpires missing for like a series or two, maybe a full week, but that's about it. So, I'd love for there to be more accountability, and also because I get the sense the umpire union is really rigged, that if you are in the union, you're in the majors, your job is well protected to the point that you basically have to quit or go on any type of leave of
Oh,
absence to have
yeah.
minor leaguers come up through the system. So it's like, you want to have any other way for people to come up and have the next generation of umpires, hopefully they're better, come into the system, you got to have more opportunities. And part of that is when an umpire sucks at their job, you push them aside and you bring a new one in.
I don't get it twisted, by the way. The best job security in the world is an umpire in the MLB. Like, you're right.
Yep.
You can't get fired. You basically have to leave. Also, I love that Angel has retired and he's still going to come up in every conversation ever about
Yep.
umpires. But
That's
like,
his legacy.
yeah, that is that as somebody said, like, he really was the face of bad umpires.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just feel like if a guy is consistently bad, like, there should be something there for that. And I think this again, and we won't get into it here because I want to have a conversation at a later time about this. Now this brings up the whole like robo umps, blah blah blah, this and that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot there. I think staying on the topic of kind of ejections and stuff, though, the other thing that I always find hilarious is like if a guy even says the word "you" or "your," it's like you're gone. You can't say that. Those are the two magic words. You can't criticize an ump, and like I feel like that's also. I, I don't want to say you shouldn't be calling a guy names or whatever, but like that also felt really dumb. It just again, it's a gray area and there's no consistency, and a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
times it feels like the umpire is in the wrong, which maybe they're not. It feels like there's always a lot of controversy around these kind of things when it should be um I don't want to say black and white, but it should be closer to black and white than it is now because it feels so out there. I think let's move on to the conversation about the interference and stuff though, because talking about another gray area of the game, and I think this is the problem that a lot of fans have, and not only baseball but across sports, is there's just a lot of gray areas and rules, and this is definitely one of them. The interference rule in the MLB, we've seen 2 times in the last 2 weeks. I don't remember when the Orioles play happened, but the White Sox,
I think it's like
Orioles,
1 week.
and the yeah, I was gonna say I don't my concept of time here is off, but the White Sox and Orioles in their series, and then a couple of days ago with the Yankees and the Angels, 2 plays where base runner interference was called for obstructing the fielder's right to make a play. The Orioles one ended the game, which was also on a sour note because the White Sox were mounting a comeback, and that killed it. It literally ended the game. And then a kind of a weird one with Juan Soto and the Angels series the other day, and it's very strange because as you're saying the Juan Soto one here. Now this one's kind of funny because like he really like
He body
knocks
checks
them
him.
out. He like boxes them out. Like, but so it's pretty funny. Now he's claiming that he had to get back to the bag, and I guess there's a case for that. But dude, literally like boxed him out,
Can you back it
and
up, Bobby?
it's
I
just
want to do
really
this
funny.
again. Well, so here's my thing about both plays, kind of summing up. Pause it right here. So here's my thing about who's in the like. I've based on the rule. I do think the umpires in both cases got it right, given the wording of the rule. There is contact made by the runner on the fielder when the fielder's trying to field the ball. And even with the both cases being infield fly rules, based on the wording, it's still the same case about fielding because technically a ball is not dead on an infield fly. The fielder could catch it or drop the ball, and other runners could advance should they choose to. So technically, like even body checking them late on an infield fly could potentially have a little bit of impact. What I'm really trying to focus on, though, as to like the argument seems to be like, oh, the fielder had to get, or the runner had to get back. Like, what do you do? For starters, you don't have to be lackadaisical. You can put your head down and go back to the base. If we're being honest with ourselves, the only person that should be looking up constantly is the fielder. The runner should look up, see that the ball's in the air, and be like, all right, I got to get back to the base. In which case, he looks down, sees where the fielders are, and then goes. And he doesn't need to walk back and jog. It's very common nowadays that people get kind of lazy on those situations because it's a easy out. They can't W off like you would on a typical pop up. But I mean, there is some merit to simply say, all right, the ball was in the air. At the initial part of the play, the shortstop was behind the baseline. Now at this point, he pulled in front of it. Soto could have immediately at the beginning seen the pop up, turn around, looked at the fielder, and been like, all right, I can make it, and just runs back to the base and stands there. The other option is he waits for the fielder and get in front of him, and then he makes a little bit of an extra wide turn in this situation. You can finish playing it out, Bobby, if you want now. But here on, he goes very kind of lazy back, and you can play it again if you want one last time without the stop. He basically walks back. Like he just starts walking, he looks up, he's not really, and all of a sudden he's like, oh wait, I gotta get back. And then he body checks him. Like if he runs back immediately to the base and then just waits on the base, there's no interference because he's on the base. And if the umpire said in that case, then he's wrong because Soto has to have claim of the base. But since Soto was walking back, he basically just put fate into the umpire's hands that, all right, you make contact with the fielder, you're screwed. So I'm fine with people want to take things a little like you take it a little lazier. It's 162 games, but like if something like this happens and it goes against you, you got to take some blame for it. Like
So okay, here's my
that's
two minds
crazy.
of thinking here because like we were now like looking at it again. It's kind of funny because prior to this we were having a conversation and it's like okay, so in this particular instance, the difference between this clip and the Orioles clip is that the infield fly was called before the interference was called in this clip, and that was not the case in the other clip because
Correct.
to me, it's almost like, all right, I know it's not a dead ball, But if an infield fly is happening,
Yeah, like
then
right here, his hands up in the air. You can
so he's
see.
calling that, and the infield fly is called. So now the ball in an infield fly doesn't have to be caught. Now I know that doesn't mean the ball is dead, but if the rule is that, okay, the base runner is hindering an attempt on the play, or hindering the fielder from making a play, how can he hinder somebody from making a play that, like, I guess really can't happen? I don't know. Like, I think there's a weird line there. Having said that, though, watching that back, like, I mean, the bases are loaded and there's no outs. If you're Soto, like, I understand he's like, oh, I have to get back here, but it felt like he knows that even if he's just standing here, the play's dead. Like, he doesn't have to hit him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he can't get doubled off here. So I I don't know. It's kind of a strange line, but like, Will, like, what is your kind of thoughts on? Okay, it's an infield fly. This it shouldn't happen because not that the play is dead, but again, he how can you hinder something that can't happen? Like, I don't know. I don't even know how to word it.
So all right, Bobby. There's an ins. All right, keep it playing. When it gets to the camera angle down the third baseline, you can stop it because I really want to show where the second baseman is on the play because that's part of the reason why. All right, so you can pause it here. So let's go hypothetical for a second. Let's just say the second baseman's got his head up his ass and he's more towards first base than towards second base. So that means that if you take the body check situation and the ball drops, so you can play it out a little bit more, Bobby, and then pause it after it falls behind the base. So if you stop it right there and the second baseman's not going for the ball, if the ball is still live, the shortstop was just body checked. The second baseman is now way down the first baseline, and the runners at second and third can then advance on the play and potentially score. So that is the main reason why I feel like you still have to call interference, even though technically being an infield fly, it doesn't matter. It's
How
because
can they
since
advance?
it's not
Wouldn't the ball
so
have
an
to be
infield
caught
fly
though?
roll. No, infield fly rule. As long as the ball either hits the glove or hits the ground, the runners can advance if they want. It's
Okay.
not like the
Okay.
person has to field it. Because there was an
Right.
instance, I think it was this year, where the Giants tried to field an infield pop up that was not called an infield fly. Actually, it was called an infield fly, I think. Um, but it was like one of those situations where you had like your Bermuda Triangle, except this was like between home plate and the pitcher's mound, and everyone converged, and the ball dropped. But infield fly was called, and the bases, I believe, were loaded. So the catcher fields the ball and touches home plate. But the runner was running from third to home, didn't have to, just didn't, I guess in that case, the runner didn't realize also infield fly rule was called, but he runs, touches home, and scores, and it counts. Because even though the catcher touched home plate, infield fly was ruled, even though it hit the ground. Um, and so therefore, because it hit the ground, the runners could advance if they want to, and the fielder then had to tag him out because it was no
Right.
longer a force play.
So
Something in
so
that case could have happened here theoretically.
so essentially, once this happens, it's almost like a tag up. Essentially, like, okay, the ball hits the
Correct.
ground or the glove. Now, so like if a runner's not
You
on the bag, they can
right.
go back and safely go back because it's an infield fly.
No,
Because
they
they
need to
can
be
tag
back
up
on
and
the
then
base.
they're in
I think.
play.
If I
Okay.
mean, if they, I don't want to say if they're not on the base because this is where I guess for me not knowing the wording off the top of my head, I don't think they can tag them up. Like you have to obviously run around the bases or whatever, like you normally would. Um, Once there's the infield fly rule, it's not like they call the infield fly rule and suddenly the runners start going. You have to start on your base before you make any advancement. So if Soto was halfway off the base and it hit the ground, he chose to advance, he would still have to hit second and then try to advance. Otherwise, I guess it would be treated like a missed base in that case. Um,
Right.
but because it's not like then the fielder, I think, could throw back to the base and get technically a force out. But like I said, you can treat it like you missed second. But the main situation why you still got to call interference on this play is because if you had a situation like that and like the second baseman wasn't where he should be, that body check then has the ball dribble away from the shortstop, and the runner on third could have scored easily, and Soto probably
Right.
could have advanced third.
And maybe that's where the miscommunication is of like, um, because maybe there is this perception of, okay, the ball is essentially dead if that happens, but you're right. Like if that would have kicked away, the runner on third could have went home. So I think this one is pretty clear to me that it definitely should have been called. Now the Orioles one, I think, is a little bit tacky. By the rule, I think it was correct, but it was a little
Mhm.
bit tacky. And then the weird thing, the still the strangest part to me is that the MLB, I guess, issued an apology to the White Sox, basically saying not that the call was wrong, but that it could have been called differently. Which, when you're talking about gray area, that can't get any more gray. Like,
God.
what do you? The league is like, okay, yes, it technically was an infield fly, but it's the umpire's discretion to call this. So you know you kind of lost on a stupid way, but it also like, what are we doing? Like, it doesn't make sense. But this one was so ticky tacky to me. Like, he gets
Mhm.
grazed and is
Right.
easily
So
able to
they're
make the
gonna
play.
show the replay.
Where like the Angels one, okay, like he definitely prevented him from making a play on the ball. This one, I mean, he made the catch. He was barely interfered with. Like, it's so, it's so
Right.
weird to me.
I want to get the slow mo replay. All right, here we go. Well, they better have a close up, but yeah, I mean, right there's when the interference happens. It's off camera to the left, so you don't see. The third base ump was calling instantly. So where it gets interesting here is, yeah, there it is. It's just a little out of the way, but kind of going back to the Soto situation. It's a lazy pop up. As a fielder, you don't have to just mindlessly look up and walk back to the base because you're not knowing where you're going. Once you see the pop up, your mindset should be, I'm going back to the base. So if you want to not interfere with someone, it should be, there's a pop up. What are my surroundings? Get back to the base.
Yeah,
So it is ticky tacky in the sense that he did barely touch him, but by the rule, and it is clear on the replay, the runner had no whereabouts as to where the fielder was. It is indeed interference.
but I mean,
I do
he's
think the
walking
umpires
back
are
right
right, and I want to
away.
bat an eye.
Like
Right,
like
but
like
he doesn't get priority on that play.
I understand that, but I think like it's not like he stood there and like looked at it and was like, "Oh man, I got to go back now." Like, he did go back right away. It was just where Henderson was playing, and where the ball was. His straightest path to the ball was the route he took, where Vaughn happened to
Mhm.
be. And like, again, I think is there interference by the rule? Yes, but it's so soft. And then again, if the MLB had come out and said, "Hey, you know what? This is the rule. They called it the way it is," I'd be perfectly fine with that. I
Mhm.
don't like that they came out and said, "Well, there's discretion with this, and this play could happen 99 more times and be called the opposite way 99 of those times." That's what I don't like about it.
I think
Like,
I think
why is that
one
the
issue
case?
that hurt one issue that I think hurts Vaughn here is if he had done his lead off of the base and the ball was popped up and he froze, that might have been different and more of a discretion thing. And then if Henderson had kind of run into him because he would have done his baseball moves or whatever, not have
Oh
moved to
God!
see where the
Please tell
ball
me
was
we're
going to
not
go.
getting the football move and baseball moves.
Hey, baseball
Oh
slowly is taking
goodness.
everything from football, I feel like. Anyway, but immediately Vaughn starts walking back. If he wasn't moving, I do think the sense of it was called a moment, but like right there, shuffle, shuffle back, shuffle back.
Yeah.
If he never moved, there wouldn't have been interference to begin with. If he had
I,
frozen on a pop up,
do you
but
think though?
if
Because I
he
feel like
well, all right, back it up like 2 seconds, Bobby. Like try to get
say
it the second the ball goes up in the air.
so
So
because he's
pause
kind
it
of
there. All right, now you can keep it playing, but I might have you pause it right away. So, because if you look at Henderson, he's up the middle. His straight line is coming in. Now, look, he's coming in, but Vaughn's coming on an angle. If Vaughn had
yeah,
not taken the 2 shuffles he did, there was no interference call because he wouldn't have
right.
touched him. But
So
Vaughn started to go as Henderson went straight in, and that caused the slight bump. Again, was it a lot? No. But if Vaughn had stayed where he was, one, there would not have been interference. And two, if Henderson was maybe more in a normal shortstop position, versus there, then either Vaughn would have shuffled out of the way and there wouldn't have been contact, or Vaughn would have stayed exactly where it was, and then there would be a different debate about, well, he was in a normal baseball move, the pop-up happened, is he able to turn around in a millisecond and all of a sudden see Henderson gunning right at him? So
are you arguing
but
for
in,
this play if he stayed stationary, like if he didn't move, or any of like if a play similar to this happens? Or
it's
just
a
this
bit
case,
hypothetical in general. I,
I guess what I'm asking is like, so based on the angle of where Gunner is and where Vaughn is, like if Vaughn didn't move, then technically yes, on this play he would have had a clear path to the ball. I thought you were arguing that if Vaughn just stays, so like if any base runner just stays where they're at, like if the ball gets popped in the air and they freeze on that pop up, if they stay in that position, they can't be called out because, or they can't be called for interference because they're standing their ground, I guess is what I thought you meant. That's why
so
I was
that's not
confused.
exactly, but it is on the guidelines. I'm thinking more of, so the big thing about this one too was there wasn't the interference happened fairly quickly after the ball was up in the air. It's not like the Soto situation where the ball was a foot from the fielder's glove and then there was the damn body check. This one was like, here's a pop up, and like literally the camera cuts and they had just hit each other. Like it was a split
Yeah.
second thing. So I'm more talking about in regards of a quick like a split second thing. Like if hypothetically Gunder was in a normal situation and was, let's say, infield in or half in, so he's like kind of on the dirt, and Vaughn takes his lead, like if like the second the ball's in the air, Gunnar Henderson takes a step and they collide, like that one's hard to kind of say interference initially, you would think of, because it happened in such a split second and one was doing a normal baseball move and the other one was going in and it caused interference. The rule would still probably be the same, just because the fielder is supposed to get priority in this situation. I just feel like if you're trying to go with like a discretion thing, if you're doing normal baseball move that doesn't seem to interfere, that's would be your best case of trying to win said debate. But since he was walking back in this case and walked into the fielder, regardless of how hard the contact was, he did walk into his path of going to the ball, and that kind of screwed him. But also, just
Yeah.
a quick thing is that you're told anyway as a runner when you're on the base to know where the fielders are. So theoretically, you could say then in that case too, from Vaughn's standpoint, there's a pop up. He should know that Gunner is more towards the middle of the infield. So therefore, if he wants to not collide with him, he should look down, not up at the ball in the sky.
Yeah. I there is a case for that, yeah. And it's just it's weird, man. And it's these happen on like, infield flies and stuff. I've already said this, but my whole issue with this thing is the gray area of
Mhm.
any if this was somebody else on that third base line, they could have called it different. Like that's what drives
Mhm.
me insane about sport, like really any sport where there's these gray areas. It's like based on the official, the call could be different. Like, and that does that add the human element to the game? I guess, but it also feels like it's taking away from the product. The other thing that kind of sucks about this too is like I think the White Sox were down 4 or 5 or 6 going into the ninth, and they actually
Mhm.
had the winning run at the plate. And it kind of
Mhm.
felt weird because, like, oh man, the White Sox who are like, the dump of the MLB right now against the
Kimbrel's
young
gonna
or
choke.
the young Orioles, and everybody loves them. And it's like that's where it was. Like, it feels like if it was the other way around, like maybe that's not called. I don't know, but like just the fact that there's even a thought that that could be a possibility is the issue that I'm kind of fighting
Mhm.
for here. Now, again, by the rule, I think that the call was right on both of these, especially Soto watching that back now feels so much more egregious than it was when I
It's
previously watched it.
such an aggressive body check
Yeah,
is the
like
thing.
it really felt like he had something against that guy. But yeah, again, umpires in the controversy, not anything new, and that was the case here. And even the MLB doubling down and not being like, No, they were right. Being like, yeah, it can change from day to day. Like, this is how our sport runs. It's just phenomenal. But let's we can stop our conversation with that and move on to our final topic of, oh, you have more you want to talk? You want to yell at umpires more? I know you love to do that.
Well, I have one thing I was gonna bring up with the other portion of the umpire section that we were doing, but it can fit in here now because it really doesn't matter where you stick it in. But I wish umpires wouldn't make the show about them, and I know I'm not the only one that says that, but I mean, like, all right, so Jorge Lopez's ejection the other day is a prime example of what I'm thinking of, because I laugh every time I see this, not because of what Lopez did, but because of what Ramon de Jesus did, the umpire. So it was a check swing. Lopez thought it should have been a check swing. What makes me crack up every time, but I'm also like, this is why I don't want umpires doing this, is as soon as he said no swing, he looked at Lopez, he literally threw his arms out like he wanted to fight Lopez and was like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it was like the craziest express. Like, I swore he was going to charge and throw hands at Lopez. I've never seen an umpire, except for maybe Laz Diaz or CB Buckner, get that animated about anything.
Okay.
But this one was so spur of the moment. So I guess I'm going to throw the question to you, because I clearly know what my stance on this is how do you feel about umpires that, put on a little bit of a show when they get into an argument, whereas I prefer the umpires that are the more even-keeled. You let the player or the coach say his piece during an argument, you eject him if you need be, and you're kind of the calm moderator rather than adding to the chaos.
So, okay, I can get behind this. Now, it's funny because Jesus did.
I'd love to see a replay if Bobby wants to look this up.
First of all, he did his best Joe West impression with that. Like, I swear I've seen Joe West do that a billion times. So I definitely do not like umpires doing that before they toss a player. Like, if they're because, like, they have this whole thing. Okay, a player, you don't want a player to show an umpire up. If they're doing that before they toss the guy, I definitely have a problem with that. I have less of a problem, although I still don't like it. If if they toss a guy, and rightfully so, or if they think so, and then they're kind of like, and they're still talking, and then they're getting animated, I have less of a problem with that. But, like, if a guy, if a dugout, or if a guy's barking and the umpire throws their hands up and, like, showing them up and then tosses them, I have a problem with that. That shouldn't happen. Which that's like a Joe West special right there. Like,
it's Laz Diaz now.
Yeah, and even CB Buckner, like, and it's funny because I kind of agree. I think CB Buckner is now like the poster child of, like, bad umpires now, since
he's up there.
I feel like he's had something recently where he kind of got into it, and he was, like, very animated. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. It feels like every time he throws somebody out, he is animated, and it's like, it's not a great look. And I think there is a little bit of, like, it's not professional per se. If the guy who's supposed to be unbiased and kind of the peacemaker in these games is turning around and throwing a hissy fit or something, or, like, being crazy toward one side, it does feel weird. So I can definitely get behind, like, in the situation the other day with the Mets, probably wasn't a great look. That's a whole separate conversation. With that
Jorge
was
Lopez and the Mets. We'll talk about the Mets later.
Yeah, like, I don't know if I've ever seen a guy I've seen stuff get thrown into the crowd. A glove over the now netting protecting the fans. Crazy stuff. But all right, with that, now let's get on to our City Connect uniforms. We are one City Connect jersey away from all teams having one, which means we can then do our tier list on these. Two more came out: St. Louis Cardinals, Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays actually debuting them tonight against the Pirates. And let's start with St. Louis first, because they were released first. This screams spring training jersey to me, and the hat is awful.
But it is their
That's
spring
awful.
training jersey, basically. Besides the squiggle marks on it, I mean, I think it is almost identical. And I don't
Yeah.
remember I think it was the owner, but I don't remember exactly. But there was someone in the organization that was saying, "Oh, we're too traditional of a team. We aren't going to really do this. I mean, we're doing it, but we're not doing it."
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like obviously the Yankees have more prestige than really anybody in baseball in that sense, but like the Cardinals do feel up there where they're not an organization to like do this crazy stuff or have this crazy marketing. It's very traditional. That's the wrong
Oh, I love
jersey.
that
We'll
Cardinals
get to
jersey.
that in we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, like it's just so low effort to me, and like again, I it's literally their spring training, like the same color as their spring training jersey. I know it's red and white, like you can't do too much
Mhm.
different, but like that's the thing. My other gripe with this, and this has been across all these City Connect
Wrong
jerseys,
tab. Sorry.
There
is
we go.
you're fine.
You're good.
Is the lettering on hats and jerseys is just
Oh,
awful.
not matching.
Like it's just bad. At this being the Lou, I think that looks weird. But yeah, man. Again, I don't know how much variation you can really do if you are trying to keep it traditional for a jersey like this, and your colors are red and white. But it just, dude, you could like
Well,
go
those
down
are different
to
also.
Florida in spring and see that.
I mean, this is the text on the hat and the jerseys are different, right? Because the
Yeah.
text on the
Oh
jersey
yeah.
there looks closer to me than what the actual text is.
Yeah,
And
that
then,
that
yeah, the text
hat
on the
is
hat
what
is like an old. It almost looks Western to me. I mean, it's
yeah,
definitely an older
definitely.
retro look to it. But no, I
Yeah.
mean the jerseys look like they put little effort into the city connecting. So like as a jersey, I don't love the squiggle marks on it. I do think it looks weird. The patch on the left sleeve is the closest thing I can really say to it connecting with the city, other than calling St. Louis the Lou, which I've personally never heard it called that, even though I visit
Right.
St. Louis a lot to see family. But maybe I'm just not in tune with that part of St. Louis's history. But I mean, as a
You
jersey
see,
itself,
my thought
because
would
it's
have
a
been
spring
that like
training,
the Lou would have been called Louisville, like instead of St.
Yeah.
Louis. Like, you know what I
that's
mean?
Yeah.
Like,
fair.
what?
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with that. So my
Yeah, I would have
gripe with
said the same thing,
almost
yeah.
my gripe with almost all these jerseys is that they have little to no true connection to the city. Because I should be able to look at the jersey and say, okay, by seeing this jersey, what is it telling me about your city? And from this, I basically say your city is the Cardinals. You have absolutely nothing else connected to it because you didn't change a damn thing. Not a bad jersey color wise because it's their spring training jerseys, and their spring training jerseys are a nice red. But from a city
Well,
connect thing, this is nothing. This is about as minimal effort as you can put into something.
if St. Louis was part of what people considered the Wild Wild West, then this would fit because again, that lettering on the hat is absolutely abysmal. I actually think the player picture, I think it was Mason Wynn, I think, who they
This
asked
one,
him uh this what, the jerseys? Oh, okay. I
I
thought
was
you
gonna
were
say,
I thought
Bob, are
you
you
were
talking
saying
about the jersey? I was gonna say
um
this screams Philadelphia on the hat, but the jersey itself doesn't really do much other than the
Yeah,
patch that says love.
I'm just making fun of the irony of the discussion that we had when Philly dropped their City Connect jerseys, and what represents the city, and it's like, well, if you actually paid attention in learning about the
Cheesesteaks
states in
and like
school.
history. All right, let's be honest.
Yeah,
I don't say
exactly.
much when John is present because I let you and John kind of just do your little banter back and forth. Now's my time to shine, damn it.
oh god, here we go.
Oh, great.
No, like but I think it was again Mason when whoever basically came out and they asked him about what do you think about
Oh,
these
you're talking about
jerseys?
Wilson Contreras
No,
with
I
how
was
bad he
I
thought the jersey was?
somebody said they're City Connect jerseys, and that was the quote. I thought it was Mason Wynn, but I could be
I
wrong.
know Wilson Contreras said something that made it seem like he didn't like it. I didn't actually read the quote, but
Yeah, but like, I mean, that's even the players know that these jerseys have been absolutely horrible, and
it's
yeah,
just lazy.
I'm not a fan. I really, I definitely hate the hat more than the jersey, but I definitely don't like the Lou on the jersey as well. Now, if you want to talk about a team who technically, in a sense, does have connection to the the city, we do have the Toronto jerseys, which has the skyline. So there is a connection per se.
I'm
Um,
assuming it's the skyline to Toronto because it says Toronto on the front. So
and
that's about my
the
best
city
guess. You could have
just
told me it was like wherever like this. I don't know. It looks like other cities to me. Just
I mean, the CN
giant needle
Tower's
doesn't
there,
help me.
so yeah. Well, the tower's there, so we get that. Um, so
Where's my maple syrup?
this is okay. I gotta see if I'm in the minority here with this one because the whole time this is what I've been thinking when they were first released. So have you ever been to like Kmart or like Target or Walmart, like places where they sell like local or like sports stuff that's unlicensed? Like cuz they don't have the licensing to it. So it'll be like a jersey of your favorite team, but they won't use the logo and it's like a different font on wherever. This is what it reminds me of. Like I vividly remember having like a Team USA soccer jersey that was like unlicensed that I got at Kmart and the font and the lettering looks exactly like this. And that's all I can
You
think about.
are
I don't know if I'm out of left field on
absolutely
this.
on your own here. Here you are. You're not even in the ballpark to be quite honest with you. But the main thing, because like so I know what you're talking about. So and because so me and Tyler grew up near the Jersey Shore, so we've been there a lot. And something that is a absolute staple of the Jersey Shore is knock off crap. Okay, just knock off anything. Now, so I always said something is trending when there's a T-shirt of it on Wildwood. So similar to what Tyler is saying, like there's definitely like shirts and jerseys that they would make where they couldn't technically use the name, although that didn't stop them most of the time, where they would just be like, yeah, like Toronto baseball team. It would be like something along that line. So I kind of know what you're talking about, but I definitely think this is a lot better than those designs that we've seen over the course of that time. That's for sure.
I don't know. It's just something about like to me, I think it's the font really for me. Again, talking about the font of like that just looks like something you would see on one of those jerseys of like, all right, we can't use the font of the team, so we're going to try to be creative and use this. To me, that's what it screams. The other thing that you can't see here, which I was just looking at tonight, which I think looks horrible, is they have like that blue that you see on there. They have that stripe running down the leg of the pant, and for some reason, to me, it looks absolutely awful. um, Look, I don't think, in retrospect to the other City Connect jerseys we've seen, I don't think this is the worst. I think it's probably middle pack, but I'm telling you, I seen this jersey, and that's all I can think about is like an unlicensed jersey. I don't know why, but that's what I see. Will, what do you? How do
At
you
least they
feel
put the
about these
maple leaf
jerseys?
on the hat. At least they
True.
put the
Well,
maple leaf on the
if,
hat.
if it's a Canadian team, the maple leaf has to be there. That's like rule number one.
Compared
Like, come on.
compared to a lot of other teams in baseball, they did a fantastic job at connecting to the city. I guess.
That's
I
your
don't know.
favorite part of these jerseys.
They
No,
did a good
well,
job at actually doing what the jerseys were meant to do. They
Yeah.
understood
I
the
know,
assignment.
like
you could say.
that's gonna be my great thing when we look at the tier list. It's gonna be like, here's 28 jerseys. What do you think? And I bet you for 23 of them, roughly 22, I'm gonna be like, there. I don't see any connection to the city, or it's so thin, I don't know or care. Like there just seems to be no effort in the connection part.
Can we say something real quick? When we do this tier list, someone might get hurt. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like
That's
Yeah.
why we're in
like,
different places when we do it.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here just kind of reflecting on what we're saying now and what we've said before about these other jerseys, and I'm thinking I have no idea how we're gonna get through that episode in one piece.
I don't think you know
really have
how
no
I'm
idea.
thinking.
Like Ty, when you plan this and you start listing topic, don't list anything else. I don't think we're gonna be able to fit anything else.
We gotta
I think
clear
it's
our
gonna take
schedule.
us dude, I think it's gonna take us an hour and a half to get through half of them. I'm gonna be dead honest with you here. I think it's gonna be a 3-hour
There might be
episode.
some
So
fights.
buckle up. We're having a telethon or a streamathon or whatever when we do this. Gotta find something to raise money for.
Oh yeah, there's definitely gonna be some jerseys that there's a lot of arguments
What I'm
about.
curious about is what like Tyler and John are gonna make as their list, because I can see like 3/4 of the jerseys being in the D and F tiers. And then the thing is,
Oh,
if
yeah.
they're not, then I'm gonna see Bobby screaming at John for calling him a hypocrite. I can just see like, I hate this jersey so much. All right, what are you gonna put on the tier list? I'd give it a B. What?
That would
Mr.
be
Dark
wrong.
Pants is gonna
I
put
can see that
put his O's
exactly
jersey at the
happening.
top, bro. I'm telling you. He's not even here to
That
defend
one's
himself,
easily
but
bottom
still.
3. That one's bottom 3. That's easy.
The other thing that's kind of weird for me too is because I can't decide. I was telling Will this prior to the show, like all these jerseys have come out, and I don't know if it's a good or bad reflection on City Connect, but I can't figure out if I like or hate any of these jerseys that come out. Like I swear to God, like this one, I really don't know. I will say though, it kind of in a way reminds me of the Royals jerseys a tad, and I really like the Royals jerseys. So by proxy, I feel like I should like this more than I do, but I don't know. I think I really do think it's this concept I have in my head that I can't get out of it. that it just looks like a knockoff cheap version of something.
I do feel like there's a growing pain period with all the jerseys because, or at least I almost want to say there should be, because it should be different enough that there causes that initial shock of like, what the heck are you doing? And then you kind of live with it, and then you can come to terms with how you feel about the jersey. So, I mean, I don't think it's crazy to see every New Jersey and be like, what the heck are they doing? But I also think you got to take in the hindsight, then looking back at that, and then looking back at the other jerseys. And a lot of times you're going to be like, okay, it's not as bad as my initial reaction made it seem
right.
like.
Well,
it caught me off guard.
I think when we do the tier list, we're gonna find that we might backpedal on a lot of the takes because the jerseys.
Hey, I don't share my opinion for a reason.
Oh yeah, because
this
you
way
like
you don't
to
know what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you like to be mad at us without explaining yourself. So, it is what it is.
We only have about 10 minutes usually for each of these sections at the end of the episode. I got to let Bobby and John fight it out.
That's true. Again, I think on the Blue Jays,
he knows what gets the clicks these days. It's Angel Hernandez and our hot takes. That's what gets the clicks.
And you're blind.
Anything of us bashing the Red Sox or bashing Angel Hernandez is sure to be for the clicks. So I think I will say this. I'll say like thumbs sort of up for the Blue Jays, but thumbs down for the Cardinals. That shit is horrible.
Yeah,
I hate that jersey.
Yeah. The Cardinals are going to be a D or an F tier. That's pretty easy.
Yeah.
I do think Blue Jays I'd probably put in a C tier.
Yeah, I think they're decent. But with that, we will wrap up our episode here. Thank you again for the support we've been getting on social media. And everybody, we've been getting a lot of followers, subscribers, and obviously people watching the videos. So we appreciate you for that. Follow us on Twitter at BL_breakdowns for updates over there and everything else. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever you can think of. We're probably big league breakdowns on those. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.